Hi, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our broadcast today. I'm so excited to be with you today with my esteemed colleague, Dr. Bell. As a reminder, I'm your host, Lori Kelly, and I'm the Chief Philanthropy Officer and the Senior Vice President at Providence. And as a reminder today, the information provided during this broadcast is for information purposes only. For any medical questions, please reach out to your primary care or healthcare professional. And so now we're going to begin this great conversation today. I'm really excited because I'm getting to interview one of my really good friends, Dr. Brian Bell. He works at the Providence Cancer Institute, and his title is the Medical Director of the Providence Head and Neck Cancer Program and Clinic, and he is a physician executive at the Providence Cancer Institute. So first of all, Dr. Bell, and I'm going to call you Brian, and just tell me a little bit about what you do in your role with Providence and how you got into being a doctor with treating cancer patients.
Oh, sure, Lori. Hi, I'm just thrilled to be with you here today. And as you know, Lori, I'm a head and neck surgical oncologist, and I'm also a clinical researcher. I came to Providence about 12 years ago or so to start our head and neck cancer program here. And I helped assemble a multidisciplinary team of surgeons, radiation oncologists, medical oncologists, dentists, speech swallow therapists, and nurses, all of whom are required and dedicated to taking care of complex patients with head and neck cancer. I'm particularly proud of the research team that we've also assembled and the work that we've done in understanding the biology of head and neck cancer. My own research has been focused on enhancing the effectiveness of cancer surgery with biologically and technologically advanced therapies. And we evaluate those through clinical trials that we run through my clinical practice and those of my colleagues. So about a year ago, I accepted a leadership role for Providence as Director of Surgical Oncology, Radiation Oncology, and Clinical Programs for the Providence Cancer Institute here in Oregon. And this is a position that allows me to continue my clinical practice, which of course I love, but also maintain and expand my research interests and help grow our clinical enterprise here in Oregon. And most recently, I became co-chair of the Providence Cancer Institute Leadership Council, which is a system-wide position that helps direct cancer care across Providence's 51 hospitals.
And within that mix too, I mean, the hospitals, 51 hospitals, are incredible. We've got cancer care probably in almost every single one of them, even some of the critical access hospitals that we have. But then beyond that, just the physician offices, and I didn't ask you to prep this, but do you have any idea how many doctors we have and the hundreds of, taking care of people with cancer?
Well, it's thousands of doctors. And the Cancer Institute itself is a collection of clinics and labs that are staffed by really a wide and diverse group of physicians, scientists, nurses, and other caregivers, again, dedicated to caring for patients within Providence. Although the hospitals and clinics and health services in Oregon are well known to us in the Northwest, as you know, Providence is actually a large not-for-profit Catholic health system that spans 51 hospitals, as I said, more than 1,000 physician clinics in 7 Western states. And the cool thing about it is that the system is driven by a mission to serve all people in need, especially those who are poor and vulnerable, and guided really by the belief that health is a human right, and it's an honor to work for them. Collectively, the caregivers within Providence treated for more than 45,000 cancer patients across our geographically, ethnically, and economically diverse region. And that makes us one of the largest and most relevant cancer care delivery systems in the country.
Yes, and I know a lot of the work that we do, we have so many patients that the data that we are able to accumulate through the patients that we have, it rivals any big system in the country, maybe even larger than anyone in the country. So talk about the kinds of research that are done at Providence, given the access to data, all of the clinicians that we have, and the research that's going on. What's going on at the Cancer Institute, and also specifically to head and neck cancer?
Sure. Well, in Oregon, which is the heart of the Providence Cancer Institute in Oregon, is actually located where I'm sitting here in the Early Trials Research Institute in the Robert W. Franz Cancer Center on the campus of Providence Portland Medical Center. It's here where our commitment as a cancer institute to research and innovation is most realized. Our cancer center was built with the express purpose of discovering in the laboratory new and more effective cancer treatments, and then translating those discoveries into patients via clinical trials. Today, a team of hundreds of scientists, clinicians, and researchers in Oregon, as well as across the system, have made Providence a major source of discovery into the nature of cancer and the development of more effective approaches to the prevention, the diagnosis, and treatment. Lori, through research and early phase clinical trials, our aim is to give patients tomorrow's treatment today.
Right. Yeah. And talk about, immunotherapy. It was something that people really hadn't heard about much, 4 or 5 years ago. It's been going on a long time at the Providence Cancer Institute. Tell us a little bit more about immunotherapy and what's going on at Providence, and then also what's going around worldwide. I mean, turn on any TV commercial and you're going to hear about Opdivo and all these different products, but what do they do and how do they help cancer patients?
Sure. So for the last 60 years, Lori, the foundation of cancer treatment has really been surgery, chemotherapy, and radiation therapy. Well, today, the practice of oncology is being transformed as a result of our understanding that the immune system and its ability to recognize and kill cancer cells in a fashion that's similar to the way it recognizes and kills viruses and bacteria is one of the most important reasons why people get cancer to begin with, and why conventional therapies like surgery, radiation, and chemotherapy either work or don't work. Cancer cells exploit the body's natural safeguards against immune attack by kind of tricking the immune system into thinking they're normal cells. If the immune system doesn't recognize they're harmful, then they'll be left alone to replicate. Immunotherapy allows the immune cells to recognize the cancer cells, and unlike chemotherapy, which acts directly on those cancer cells as well as normal cells, immunotherapy uses the body's natural defenses to kill the cancer, and sometimes it results in a cure. Lori, I think that we are at a watershed moment in the history of cancer treatment, and bear with me for a minute while I explain why I think this is. 100 years ago, the most common cause of death was not cancer. It was not even heart disease. It was infectious disease. Prior to the pandemic a year ago, if anyone died from infectious disease in the developed world, it kind of made the evening news.
Right.
You know, what changed? What changed was that we developed a fundamental understanding of the microbial nature of infection and developed new methods of prevention and treatment. We developed clean water supplies and pasteurized milk. We invented vaccines and antibiotics and antivirals and antiretrovirals that until recently made infectious disease kind of an afterthought. Well, as we all know, COVID reminded us that we are still vulnerable to infectious diseases. But as tragic as COVID has been, Lori, with the loss of more than 2.5 million souls worldwide, as disruptive as our response to the pandemic has been to the lives, up to our own lives and our economy, it's kind of sobering to think that during that same time frame, the loss of life to cancer has been more than 3 times as great as that from COVID. Almost 10 million people worldwide. And so it's a reminder to us that we have a long way to go, and our ability to harness the power of the immune system is just beginning. And our ability to cure cancer is just evolving from this kind of sea change in our knowledge.
Yeah. And how can people boost their immune system?
Well, there's a lot of different ways, and a lot of those are under investigation right now. One of the earliest ways was actually first administered by somebody that you and I know very well, and that is the director of the Providence Cancer Institute here in Oregon, and the founder, Walter Erba. As you know, Dr. Erba is a medical oncologist, PhD immunologist, and his research has been focused on immunotherapy. In 1983, when Dr. Erba was at the National Cancer Institute, he personally administered, for the first time in a human patient, interleukin-2, or IL-2, which remains to this day one of the most effective immunotherapies for the treatment of cancer. A few years after that, Dr. Erba, as you know, was recruited from his position at the NCI to right here to Providence to start a cancer research program. And naturally, that research program was focused on immunotherapy. And I like to say, in the words of Barbara Mandrell, who
I forgot about her.
Providence was immunotherapy before immunotherapy was cool.
Yeah.
And but it really is a tribute to Dr. Erba's visionary leadership that while most cancer centers were focused on cytotoxic chemotherapies or other approaches, he recruited investigators from the NIH like Bernie Fox, who is an internationally renowned tumor immunologist and helped develop our adoptive cell therapy program, and who continues to work on novel cancer vaccines that prime the immune responses or the immune system's ability to respond to cancer. One of them is currently in clinical trials here at Providence. Dr. Erba recruited Andy Weinberg, a T-cell biologist who would go on to discover anti-OX40, which we know well, a novel cancer therapy that stimulates immune systems to fight the immune cells to fight cancer. And Brendan Curdy, a medical oncologist whose focus is on translating those discoveries like OX40 or doxorubicin cancer vaccine from the lab bench to the bedside where it can help patients. And and we've grown a lot, and I'm proud to say we've made some tremendous contributions to our knowledge of stimulating the immune response and modulating those. But without question, though, Lori, and I know this is a long answer to your question, but without question, the watershed event for our Cancer Institute in general and for the field came in 2010, and that was with the publication of a clinical trial that tested an entirely new type of immunotherapy called checkpoint inhibitors. These immune modulators essentially take the brakes off of the immune system and kind of dampen down reverse the body's natural tendency to dampen down an immune response and instead elicit an anti-cancer immune response. And the trial that Dr. Erba was running, this trial showed that a drug called ipilimumab, or anti-CTLA-4, was the first ever to show survival benefit in patients with metastatic melanoma, a disease that was previously uniformly fatal. And again, Dr. Erba led that trial. A year later, in fact, almost exactly 10 years ago this month, ipilimumab was approved by the FDA for the treatment of melanoma, and the rest is history.
Right.
Interestingly, the researcher who originally discovered this approach, this checkpoint inhibitor in the lab, a scientist named Jim Allison, won the Nobel Prize in 2018. And there are now 8 FDA-approved checkpoint inhibitors to treat all kinds of different cancers. And today we consider immunotherapy the 4th modality of cancer treatment, right along with surgery, radiation, and chemotherapy. And again, I'm proud that we at Providence have had an important role to play in their development.
Yeah. It's been I've only been with Providence a little over 5 years, and just the advances that have been made over the time that I've been there, and just the learnings, and just the new people that have come on, like Eric Tran, bringing adoptive T-cell therapy to Providence. It's just been incredible. We do also, if people have questions for Dr. Bell, he can't answer every medical question, but you can put your questions in the chat. We'll try to get to you a little bit later. One of the other topics, along with immunotherapy, that I'm really interested in, and I know that we have a really growing body of work in, is genomics, and how the human genome, remember the Human Genome Project, and how that's given way to personalized medicine, and how does that factor into your cancer care and whether or not you will respond to immunotherapy or not? Because I know that's another question. Some people respond great. We always hear about Jimmy Carter, who had this terrible cancer, and now he's just doing fantastic, but then other people don't respond. So that's about 5 questions in one, but I know you'll be able to handle it.
Sure. No. Well, genomics is a huge part of what we do. Human genomics, as you know, Lori, is the study essentially of the entire set of genes that are found in humans. A genome is an organism's complete set of DNA, which is kind of the blueprint for all of the information needed to build a human being. So genomic medicine involves using genetic information about an individual as part of their clinical care, for example, as a diagnostic or a therapeutic biomarker to aid in clinical decision making. And this is particularly important in cancer, which is a disease that is inherently caused by genetic mistakes or mutations that drive human cells to divide and replicate uncontrollably. Cancer-causing genetic changes are often acquired during one's lifetime as a result of errors that occur as cells divide or from exposure to carcinogens, so that damage DNA, things like tobacco smoke or radiation or UV rays from the sun. So it turns out that these genetic mutations are antigenic, meaning that our immune system can recognize them as being foreign. It's like a flag on a cancer cell. And if everything works right, the immune cells can be mobilized to more effectively eradicate the cancer before it has a chance to spread. The more genetic mutations that we have, or what we call neoantigens that are present in the tumor, the more opportunities or the more flags there are for the immune system to respond to. And now it's technically possible to characterize the biology of a patient's cancer and the patient's immune system to provide investigators with the data necessary to develop a truly personalized treatment program. And this is one of the major focuses of our research at Providence. Now, the good news, though, Lori, is that many of the mutations that cause cancer also cause weaknesses that we can target to kill cancer cells. And this is a different approach, really, called genomic targeted therapy or small molecules. But Providence has developed a world-class molecular genomics laboratory. And we perform state-of-the-art next-generation genomic sequencing on using all the latest technology. Virtually every patient treated in our system right now with advanced cancer within the Providence Cancer Institute, treated at Providence, has their entire genome sequenced or mapped, literally millions of DNA fragments. And this allows us to identify a large number of mutations across the genome in a matter of days. So by sequencing the genome of a patient's tumor, our doctors can identify what we call actionable mutations, meaning mutations for which we have a drug or treatment option that helps them to come up with this personalized treatment plan.
Yeah, I mean, it's just incredible. And I know there's a lot of, I wouldn't say controversy, but people, we can all get our genome if we pay the money, right? Mm-hmm. We can all get some results, and we can see maybe where we might be headed with our future, with our health. And a new test is just coming out that Providence is one of only a few centers across the country that we are going to be able to do a simple blood test and be able to tell whether you have 50 types of cancer. And the company is called Grail. Can you tell us a little bit more about a product like that? And is this trustworthy? And, is it, as you're saying, I mean, we're just hitting the cusp of all these great potential findings for cures, but also to predict where our future might go. And what are the upsides, downsides of those kinds of things? And how do you see the success of Grail?
Sure. So what you're talking about, Lori, is early detection. So we know that cancer, when caught early, is most often very curable. But once cancer spreads to lymph nodes or to distant sites, then all bets are kind of off. Today, the majority of cancers are found too late when outcomes are often fatal. Currently, there are large-scale screening efforts that we're all familiar with: mammography, colonoscopy, pap smears, PSA testing, for example. And these aim to detect cancer at its earliest stages. But these tests are expensive, they're invasive, and they're not always effective. Currently, there are broad efforts at using genomic information that is unique to cancers and found in the bloodstream to facilitate the early detection of cancer. This is a so-called liquid biopsy that so many of us have heard about, which identifies tumor DNA that circulates in the blood. So recently, Providence announced a partnership with a biotech company called Grail, in which we became the first health system in the country to offer Grail's new multi-cancer early detection blood test as a complement to the recommended single cancer screening test that we all are aware of. And we believe that when combined with the power of our genomics research at Providence, having a single blood test in the future may detect many different types of cancer and change entirely how we screen and detect cancer in the future.
Yeah, just incredible, all the things that are going to be available to all of us. And as you said, Providence cares for all. And so these kinds of things will be, throughout all of our regions. So we're really excited for that. We did have a question from LinkedIn, and someone was wondering when we were talking about immunotherapy, what types of cancer is immunotherapy being used for, or can all cancers respond to it? And so just I'll have you answer that one.
Sure. So that's a great question. So the short answer is that virtually any type of cancer or any patient with cancer is potentially a candidate for immunotherapy. And we now know that patients with more mutated tumors, more highly mutated tumors, will respond to that treatment a little more predictably than other tumors that are less mutated. Similarly, there are patients who don't elicit an immune response or who are immunocompromised or for whatever reason are less likely to benefit. And this is one reason Providence has developed an in-house test, for example, called tumor mutational burden that's now utilized as a biomarker to direct immunotherapy and predict response to immunotherapy with some kind of cancers. And this is offered through our system, molecular genomics lab that started here in Oregon. But as I mentioned, not everyone responds to immunotherapy, and current immunotherapies are only effective probably in about 20 to 40% of patients with certain types of tumors, and mostly ineffective in other types. For example, the majority of patients with melanoma will respond and benefit from immunotherapy. It's a highly mutated tumor. Mm-hmm. However, glioblastoma, which is a type of brain tumor, doesn't respond at all. Now, one explanation for this high failure rate is that current immunotherapies are often chosen empirically without an adequate understanding of either the patient's tumor or the unique biology of the patient. With a better understanding of the patient's immune system, the genetic determinants of response, the status of their cancer cells and their immune cells, we believe in the future it may be possible to predict a patient's response to that therapy and use that data to design a patient-specific or personalized approach.
Thank you for that. And there's another question on LinkedIn about how does immunotherapy work with chemotherapy while the chemo can have a negative impact on your immunity?
That's a great question, and one that is ongoing. It appears the combination, and by the way, because not everybody responds to immunotherapy, there's a large-scale effort ongoing to find the best ways to combine immunotherapies with our conventional therapies, such as chemotherapy, such as radiation therapy, as well as other immunotherapies. Chemotherapy in particular can have a dramatic improvement in response rates. So some patients that are treated with immunotherapy can have their response enhanced by combining it with chemotherapy. And this is somewhat paradoxical because chemotherapy can reduce the number of lymphocytes in the body, for example. It's cytotoxic, but it appears to have a favorable effect. But we're still trying to understand how best to combine these therapies and in what order.
Yeah. Well, and another question too. I think all of us feel worried we're going to get cancer. We hear about people having cancer. So what can we all do as individuals to look for signs, and how often should you see your doctor? What kind of questions should you be asking, and what kind of tests should you be requiring? Because you can also go overboard, I know, as well. But just people just living their ordinary life and not thinking about things like that. What should they be doing to prevent the onset of cancer?
Sure. Well, so Lori, there's a lot of signs and symptoms of cancer. It's very, very diverse, and it depends on the type of cancer.
Yeah.
Some signs, such as a lump or a bump, are kind of obvious. A lump, particularly a lump or a bump that doesn't go away, these can be found all over the body, in the neck, the axilla, the groin, and they may or may not be associated with cancer. Other signs, such as unexplained weight loss, or shortness of breath, or an abdominal mass, or distension, or belly pain, these can also be symptoms. Hoarseness that doesn't get better, skin or mouth ulcerations or that don't get better, bleeding skin lesions. All of these can be a sign that something bad's going on. Most or any new sign or symptom that doesn't get better after 2 or 3 weeks and isn't otherwise explained should prompt a visit to your primary care physician.
Great. Yeah. And self-care is always looking for those signs and those that you are around too, not to scare them. But if you do notice something, I've heard about people that are on television and a viewer writes in and says, "Hey, I noticed something while you were talking." And so just to look for those things. Final question. This has been such a great conversation. I think we could go on for a lot longer, but what kind of supportive services does Providence have for patients and families? And what should people be looking for as they're looking for, extra tools to help them get through a diagnosis of cancer for themselves or the caregiver?
Sure. Well, we're fortunate that our patients have access to a wide range of support services. For example, within our integrative medicine program, they have access to acupuncture, naturopathy, therapeutic massage, chiropractics, and dietary counseling. We have cancer support groups, wellness classes, screening and prevention services. We have transportation services for those patients who have a hard time getting from one place to the other, rehabilitation services, as well as, importantly, financial services as well. We want to make sure that patients aren't adversely affected from a financial standpoint just because they have cancer. And finally, one of the resources which I'm most proud is our guest housing, because that was made possible through the generous support of our donors. Patients have access to guest housing that allows them to come from a long way to receive treatment, stay as long as they need to at little cost for the duration of the therapy. And it's an amazing resource for our patients.
Yeah. And thanks for your point. I'll put a plug in for the work that we do in philanthropy, but clearly 70 to 80% of all of the research and the care that we can provide at the Cancer Institute in the Research Institute is provided by philanthropy, and much of that through private philanthropy, not through government grants and those kinds of things. So it's so important, and we just so appreciate people that are willing to give of their time and talent and treasure to do this really important work. So today, our guest, Brian Bell, just so glad to have you join us, and I hope everyone found a lot of good learnings. And for more information on the Cancer Institute, you can go to our website. This has been scrolling across the screen. And I want to thank everyone for listening and for sending in questions. To learn more about the research, resources, and programs at Providence, please visit finishedcancer.org/Oregon. And then please make sure to follow us on Providence Health System on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram, and under Providence on Twitter. So that's it for today. Thank you guys so much for joining us. I hope you have a great day. Take good care of yourself and those you love. Take care. Bye-bye.